Hello and welcome to the part 2 of building the application. In this part of the video, we are going to add label widgets. Widgets are Tkinter tools that enables you to provide different types of controls to your application. So they enable you to add things like buttons, labels, text boxes, and so on. So the tools you basically need to control or navigate through your application. We are also going to create objects that will enable us to accept inputs from the users and also to display values that we would have computed from inputted values. To save time in this video, I've already pre-staged the code, so I'm going to add a line of code at a time and then explain that line of code. I have added a line of code, line number 8, and it is a label. So I started with the word label, and inside the parentheses I am referencing the window variable that I created on line number 5. And inside this label, I'm setting some properties that we can use to apply styling to the label to make it look more attractive. So I'm adding a font, and the type of font is Helvetica. I'm wanting the size to be 12. I want the font, which is the text, to be bold. I do a comma and then add another property, which is BG. BG is same thing as background color, and I'm setting the background color to light green, which is the same as the background color for the application window because I want it to blend in. And then we've got this text variable here, which I've set to a value of annual interest rate. Now this is the actual text that will appear on the label. Next, I've got outside this parentheses, we've got this method here called grid. And what this function does, it enables you to kind of like place the label inside the application window. So this grid method here or function is basically used to position the label inside the application window. So what I'm saying here, I want this label to appear on row number 1 inside the window, application window, and on column number 1. So I want it to appear in a table-like structure. And then here I'm using this sticky argument. When you create widgets or label widgets in Tkinter, it automatically creates them in the center, but you can change that position by using this sticky argument. The sticky argument has 4 values: north, south, east, and west. So in this case, I'm giving it a value of west. I'm going to add 4 more labels. So I'm just going to copy this label on line number 8 and just paste it 4 times and just change the text value for each of the other labels. So I've added more lines of code here. I've added line 9 to 12. So basically similar to line number 8. I've changed a few bits and pieces. The values for the text obviously are different because I don't want all the labels to be labeled the same name. So I've changed the text values. Also, I've changed the position of each of the label on the application window. So the first one appears on row 1, second one appears on row 2, the next appears on row 3, and then row 4 and row 5. So they all appear on different rows within the application window, but they have the same column just because I want to keep them in a table-like format. Also notice the sticky values are all set to west. Now that I've added the labels, the next thing I want to do is create some objects. The first three objects are going to be responsible for accepting inputs from the user. And we're going to also add a function called entry to each of those three objects, which are used to accept inputs from users. So on line 15 and 16, I have added the first object. I also added an entry function. Line 16 is an entry function which allows the label to accept input. So here, this is going to be basically the input field, and I have defined it with the self dot and then the name. So anywhere you see self is basically used to represent an instance of that variable. So line 15 created a variable called annual interest rate var, and I've set it to equals to this string var. Okay, so this self here, and when you put a self in front of a variable, it means you can reference that instance from anywhere within your code, because all these are under this class. So if I create a function, another function, I should be able to access these variables just by using this self next to the name. And then line 16 is the entry function, which is used to accept input. And then basically here, this justifies just a property that moves the label, the entry label, to the right. And I'm also putting the entry label on the separate line on the grid. So this here, line 16, is going to be the actual input field, while from line 9 to 13 is the actual label. That's the name of the label, while line 16 is the actual input that enables the user to enter some information. So what I've done here on line 15 and 16, I'm just going to copy those two lines of code and replicate it a few more times and then change a few of the values. So I've added some more line of code here from line number 17 to 24. So they're all paired up. So line 17 is another input field that will enable the user to enter a value. Again, I've got self dot number of years. This number of years again is a variable, and by putting the self next to it enables me to access this variable from anywhere within the class. So I've set it to equals to this string var. This string var basically is just a class from tkinter. It is used to monitor any changes to the tkinter variables. Anytime a variable changes, this is used to monitor the changes. And then the entry function on line 16 basically is what enables the user to enter input, and then it captures that input. So they're basically all doing the same thing. So line 15 and 16, we've got the object, and then we've got the entry function. 17 and 18, object, entry function. Line 19 and 20, we've got the object, and then we've got the entry function. The entry function enables input, so it creates an input label where user can enter information. Line 21 and 22, line 21 is another object. However, it does not have an entry function because we don't want the user to enter any information. The object for line 21 and object for line 23, we are going to use those to display some values. So 22, line 22 is a label variable here. So this, you can see here, I've got the word label. So it's going to be a label, and that will have this text that says monthly payment. Okay, so that's that one there. And then line 24 also is going to be a label. So line 22 and 24 are going to be labels that will display the value for the monthly payment for the loan and the value for the total payment of the loan. So those two do not have an entry function because we don't want to accept inputs from user. We want to display values from the inputs we've already collected from the 3 input fields above. So most of the other properties inside the labels, we've already used them before above, so no need to go through them. I explained previously what the grid does. We've got the grid here, and this text variable is just got this value of self.totalPayment, which is referring to the variable defined on line 23. So the same thing here, this text variable on line 22, the value here is referring to the value defined on line number 21. So it's pretty much similar to the codes above. So I'm going to end this part of the video here, and we will continue in part 3. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.